Prime Minister. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have that confidence.
I think the Prime Minister still carries a lot of credibility with the voters. Should there be a review? Maybe we should have a discussion on that.
Of course not. The Prime Minister has the full support, absolute support of our caucus, and we're enthusiastically starting a new session.
Well, there might be some misunderstanding as to what Ken is calling for, so I don't want to prejudge that, but you will be hearing from him.
Liberal MPs are on Parliament Hill as we speak this evening for a caucus retreat after one of their own started musing about putting Prime Minister Justin Trudeau up for a leadership review. Most MPs, as you heard there, we spoke with on the Hill, are voicing support for the Prime Minister, but there were still some who also supported the call for a potential review. Could that grow into a bigger vulnerability for the PM? Let's bring in the front bench to talk about that. Former Quebec Liberal Cabinet Minister David Heurtel is here. He's a political analyst at CTV News Montreal and CJAD 800, where he's also a host. Former Alberta Conservative Cabinet Minister Gary Mar is with us. He's the president and CEO of the Canada West Foundation now. Former Ontario NDP MPP Gurratan Singh is here. He's now vice president at Crestview Strategy. Also, we always disclose the brother of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. And Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Good to see you. David, I'll start with you because you've attended a lot of caucus retreats, just like Gary and Gurratan, and you've been to cabinet retreats, which they're just coming off of in Montreal. Look, I'm not saying there's a huge amount of MPs saying let's do a leadership review, but is this the conversation the Liberals want in the headlines right now, or is it a potential vulnerability?
Well, I think it's something you can't really control because I have a suspicion here that the MPs that are talking about a review are the ones that would lose their jobs if there were an election tomorrow. And so, but overall, and I'll give you here the Quebec perspective here. Quebec is where the Trudeau Liberals are, I think, the only province where the Liberals aren't trailing the Conservatives. And anytime you have rumblings like this about a leadership review or contesting the leadership of the leader, the next question becomes, well, then who could replace? And there's nobody. Right now, if you look in Quebec, the 35 Quebec seats that the Liberals have, which are absolutely necessary for the Liberals to even think about keeping power next time around, there's absolutely nobody. Mark Carney, Anita Anand, Chrystia Freeling, go down the list, François-Philippe Champagne, Mélanie Joly, whoever else you want to think about. There's nobody that could keep the Liberals where they are in Quebec. So it can be very nice and good to have this conversation, but ultimately these people are ultimately going to have to shut up and just fall in line because there's no way right now that the Liberals, where we're basically a year, maybe a year and a half away from an election, there's no way there's going to be a leadership review.
The question, Gary, is whether they will do exactly what David just spelled out, likely the people around the Prime Minister want them to. In this case, this MP, Ken McDonald, is someone who's already spoken out against the government on a pretty significant file for them, right? The carbon tax. So it's not out of line with what he's done previously, but even the whip telling us, oh, there's going to be an update, he's going to clarify any moment. Like, we've been refreshing the Facebook page for hours now, and that clarification has yet to come.
Well, first of all, let me say I agree with David. I mean, there's no interest more sincere than self-interest. And you know, if an MP thinks that he or she is going to lose their job with the current leader, you know, they have no downside to speaking up. And this is part of the normal life of a caucus and the normal life of a government. I mean, Mr. McDonald himself says, I wouldn't have gotten elected but for Justin Trudeau, and he talks about how he is an estimable politician and a great campaigner, but he's clearly concerned about things like the carbon tax, as many Canadians are. And so he has no downside if he's not going to get elected again. He has no downside in speaking his mind. And furthermore, the longer you get into the life of a government, there's people who are in his cabinet who, of course, are going to say, well, I completely support the Prime Minister, but there's backbenchers that think, gee, you know, maybe I should have gotten a shot of being in the show and being in cabinet. Maybe they haven't gotten a parliamentary secretary appointment. Maybe they haven't gotten important committee assignments. And as a consequence, they don't have any downside to speaking up either. And so what'll be interesting over the course of the next year is at some point the Prime Minister will have to ask his cabinet, who's going to offer up and who's not going to offer up in the next election. And depending on what happens there, it may signal that there are cabinet ministers who do not decide to offer up in the next election and find opportunities outside of government and try and make a transition to life after government. That'll be interesting to see if that further creates, again, some of the stories that we would normally expect in the life of a government that's been around for a few years.
Yeah, I think what's also interesting, and to both David and Gary's points, Gurratan, yes, of course, there's self-interest involved in speaking out against the leader of your party and the Prime Minister, and there are his own local electoral needs that are factored in there. At the same time, I think what he's saying has been also borne out by polls over the last number of months, which show that there is a certain level of negativity in the Canadian public, specifically directed toward the Prime Minister, where he was such an asset to the party in 2015. That brand does not carry the weight that it once did.
Well, it's a problem when Canadians are really dissatisfied with the Prime Minister. It's even a bigger problem when you have this kind of dissatisfaction brewing amongst your caucus. And to me, it also speaks to a lack of caucus discipline. I'll be a contrarian voice here. There actually is a problem with these backbenchers being that critical of the Prime Minister, because ultimately, when people vote in elections, they primarily vote for the Prime Minister or the leader of the party and the party. And if they weaken the position of their leader, they could actually weaken their own position. And if they were going to win by 100 or 200 votes, they could be jeopardizing that as well. So I think it's a bad. It speaks of that lack of discipline within the party, and more than anything, it really demonstrates that the sentiment that is out there in the public, that this dissatisfaction with the past 8 years, the fact that people haven't seen their lives improve dramatically, we're now seeing MPs echo that, and that's definitely something that should be on the mind of cabinet and the Prime Minister.
At the same time, to circle back where we started, Laura, David's right. Like, who's waiting in the wings that could for sure, take the Liberals to where they want to go in the next election? There's lots of people who started organizing, but those efforts have even appeared to quell in recent months.
That's always been the biggest question, too, and time, right? They're running out of time. If there was going to be some sort of leadership race, when is that supposed to happen? And, how's that going to play out with an election expected next year? And to get that leader ready for an election, out meeting people. So it does look kind of increasingly likely that Justin Trudeau will lead the party still into the next election. Of course, those words might come back to haunt me because anything can happen. It doesn't seem like there's some sort of, organized push beyond some griping from various members like Ken MacDonald to rid of Prime Minister Trudeau. But this is all kind of chipping away, right? It's not good that he has come out and said this. It's not good that Percy Down has come out against Trudeau either. It's all kind of layering on top of each other. And to have one of your MPs talk about the fact that people hate the Prime Minister now is not a great look for the first day of your caucus retreat on Parliament Hill and getting ready to show unity as the House returns. So to me, this is very much shades of kind of Stephen Harper in 2015, when a lot of MPs talked about the fact that they would go to doors and people would tell them, look, I'm still a Conservative. I still like you as my local representative. I just cannot stand Harper anymore. I can't vote for him. And so this is kind of starting to sound like it's echoing that sentiment as the government is starting to run out the clock. We'll see what happens, but it's a very interesting day on Parliament Hill.